Oh, I didn't realise I'd be in the mic.
Well, good afternoon.
Hello, everyone.
Everyone's here for the long haul today. So it's really wonderful to be back here. It's been a little while, and it's so great to see people in person again. Today's topic is on serving a multi-generational workforce by prioritising a positive culture of meaning and purpose. I've been talking about meaning and purpose since, 2005. Lucas was actually in a class that I taught at Sydney Uni, and it was when positive psychology was first emerging. And I taught a whole lecture on meaning and purpose, and at the time there was hardly anything. It was Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, which is a brilliant book. If you've never read it, it's one of those ones that you probably need to read. But since that time, there's been a significant increase in research. It's a topic that I'm certainly interested in. But today we're going to be talking about it specifically in terms of the workforce, and we've got the wonderful Jodi Adams here, from HR Director from Medline, and Peggy North from Monash, Head of People and Culture, Anthony Tran, Head of Learning and OD from Thornton, and Lucas Finch, Head of Wellbeing, Global Director of Wellbeing from Xero. So welcome to the panel today. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
So I actually feel like I'm living a multi-generational life in many ways. Personally, I have a 95-year-old dad. Very sadly, I lost my 96-year-old mum earlier this year. But I also have grandchildren. So I'm in what they call the sandwich generation right now. And I think I'm probably quite representative of a lot of people in the workplace right now that are in that position. And in fact, I was attending a workplace wellbeing conference last week, and there was quite a bit of discussion around, we hear a lot of focus on childcare, but we haven't had much focus on elder care. And I think that's, for me, is one of the topics that I think is definitely going to be relevant in terms of multi-generational workforce. So we're going to explore that a little bit today. For those that don't know, multi-generational workforce is one in which the employees span the different generations, and right now in many organisations there's 5 generations, ranging from the Gen Z, the millennials, the baby boomers, and some even in what might be referred to as the silent generation, or the traditionalists, I believe it's called. And apparently this is the first time in history when we've had people with this significant age range. So and we also have an ageing population, as we know, and the ageing people looking to postpone retirement or move into semi-retirement. And I also discovered in my preparation for today's panel that ageing is the most common form of discrimination in the workplace, which I wasn't aware of. So that's interesting. So there are many challenges that I've come across in my research in preparation, but I think there's also wonderful opportunities and many strengths that we can play to by having such diversity. So why is prioritising positive culture with meaning and purpose so relevant and so important? Well, hopefully we're going to find out today, and hopefully we're going to leave you feeling a little inspired, given it's the last session of the day. So my first question, Jodi, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay. How do we foster a positive workplace culture, one where there's mutual respect and an understanding between generations? And how do we build those positive relationships between generations? I'm assuming, I think we spoke in our preparation through curiosity and compassion, I think 2 of the big C's, and perhaps understanding different values or different perspectives. And I think we also shared collectively that we've all spoken a lot about unconscious bias or even conscious bias previously, but perhaps we do need to reconsider our mindsets or our attitudes or perspectives when it comes to these multi-generational, yes, please feel free.
Sorry about that. I still haven't got past the fact that I'm a sandwich. I'm a gluten-free one, to be
Me too.
clear, but I definitely am a sandwich. I'm very fortunate to work for an organisation where care is first, background, generation is second, and for me, curiosity and non-judgment is sort of the mantra that I promote in the organisation. Notwithstanding, you do need to understand some of the challenges each of the generations face or the opportunities they face. So at the organisation I'm fortunate enough to work in, it's understanding ultimately, we have a dual purpose, all of us, in that we represent the organisation, we're trying to ensure the organisation is still standing for those employees, but equally every person has a part to play, and we need to have that curiosity around what's important to them, not just what generation they come from. And my philosophy, and thankfully the values talk to that too, is through care, understanding and making sure they've got role clarity, they've got a voice, they speak up. I wanted to say to Suzy, and I think we did during our chat, we are not perfect, and I know all of you out there, we aim to or strive for an organisation where everybody feels safe and wants to come to work and is happy, whether they're from Gen Z or a baby boomer. So I think from our perspective, it's giving people understanding of what they do and the purpose piece behind that every day, and helping them to appreciate what part of the organisation they are and how they fit into the big picture.
Yep, fantastic. Thank you so much. So you do have quite diversity in age.
We do.
Yep.
We've got, I think our youngest person is about 24, and we've got one of our wonderful workers in our finance team is 75. We have
Amazing.
Warehouse workers and production workers that work also in their mid to late 70s, and it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. The respect that's shown to those people in our organisation.
Love it.
Yeah, I'm really proud of, and I don't think that I can take responsibility for that. I think it's just an organisation where you care for people.
Yeah, so that's sort of underpinning the whole approach, really. Thank you so much. And Peggy, I'm also aware that you've done a lot of work, particularly around employee benefits. How do they relate to, I guess, the sense of meaning and purpose and creating a positive workplace culture?
Yeah, I think from an employee benefits perspective, it's not a one-size-fits-all.
Yeah.
I think it's important that when you're looking at your workforce mix, we have a workforce that's made up of 94% female. And when we look to design and consider what the benefits are for our employees, we look to see what it is that's actually meaningful to them. And I think you can only do that by actually talking with your employees, with your workforce, and understanding what it is that that is going to be meaningful to them. I think that's the only approach you can actually take.
Yeah. Well, in regard to the employee benefits, do the benefits vary for different generational needs? And could you give us some examples of that?
Yeah, look, I think they absolutely do. I think when we look at the life cycle aspect of an employee, and we're part of particularly our HR strategy at the moment is about focused around the employee life cycle. And we look at everybody's journey through the organisation. I think if we look at the end of career aspect, there is a number of different ways that we support employees who, as you say, celebrate the time that they've been with the organisation. And again, for no fault of mine particularly, but certainly no fault of our organisation, we're celebrating employees that are 35 plus years with an organisation. And in a healthcare setting, that's really phenomenal. The contributions that they make, certainly in our aspect, it's to the contributions of reproductive health and reproductive care, and that's something, in my view, certainly needs to be celebrated. So we focus on that. We focus on transitions to retirement. We focus on different ways that people will want to potentially consider looking at that. I think then you look at the other scale and potentially people coming into the organisation, that whether age I don't think has a factor in that aspect. But it's also then about the range of things that we can actually provide. They are health and wellbeing aspects. There's learning and development, professional development, mentoring, etc. There are all different ways that I think you can provide that value proposition to employees at different parts of that life cycle.
Absolutely. I was involved early on in my coaching career in providing pre-retirement coaching in one of the big four companies, actually, to help people with that transition, and also continuing to help them maintain a relationship with the organisation post retirement as well, which I thought was really interesting. And then recently, as I mentioned, I was at this conference last week, and Mercer are just launching a new program that does help people like myself that suddenly you'll find yourself in this position of trying to make sense of the aged care service and the complexity of it for anyone that's been through it. It's very challenging, and so we are going to see more services like that being made available, which I think is so badly needed.
Yeah.
But I'll move on to the next question, and this one's going to be primarily focused for Anthony. He had some great ideas around this. So clearly this is a diversity, equity and inclusion topic, particularly the age diversity. How is your DEI policy or strategy, how does it support a multi-generational workforce, Anthony, at Grant Thornton?
So I think for the conversation around DEI, particularly in Australia, has continued to shift. And I think there has been some, corporate Australia has led the way, I think, in many ways. Governments have also supported, I think, the movement and the progress forward. But I think there is an intersect where we need to really be pragmatic about the approach within an organisation. We've gone fast in certain elements, we've also gone slow in some others, because we need to get our leaders and our people on board to understand what it actually means for us and what's the value, and can we bring it really to life through the whole system and the impact more broadly into society as well. So for us, I think there was a stage where we wanted to be on the table with all the other organisations within the professional services landscape. That's not enough. So if we think about the talent life cycle, the momentum forward from a really young talent pool, it's a big thing within the accounting and advisory space. You get a lot of young people coming into the firms, and it's an up and out model, so it's a really rigid structure. So you've got to work within some of those confines. From a DEI perspective, we've continued to change that conversation, but we need to educate. So beyond just thinking about unconscious bias, it's about conscious inclusion. So moving the dial to thinking about that from all the different facets of what you want to focus on. And we shine spotlights onto some different pillars, but from a generational perspective, like you've touched on, Suzy, around it's not just the time that they're there, it's the time that they exit from us as well, and all of those moments that really matter. And that's really critical about the experience we want to create for our people. You can't be great at everything, so what is it the few things that you can be really good at? And what are the systems, policies, benefits, internal conversations that you want to shine a deeper spotlight on? So whether it's gender, whether it's, if your organisation is there, that's a great starting point. How can you extend that a little bit further? And how do you create active allies, bystanders that will speak up and call out things, particularly in that ally group that represent, the majority of Australia, which is the white male, middle-aged men. We need them to speak up to transition the conversation a little bit further. It's not being a bystander that just kind of accepts what is norm. It's actually nudging it a bit further through education as well. So, professional services, we started with the gender conversation. We've moved much further than that, but we still have got gender inequity. So primarily it's still there, but we've been able to shine spotlights to broaden out that conversation for things that are relevant for people at different stages of their life. And you can't expect people at their early stage of life to consider things for others, but if we get the conversation, reverse mentoring, space for everyone to add value, so whether it's strategic priorities, client work, community work, policies, procedures, that's really important. So the voice of our people from all levels is really, really critical. So we use a lot of data to inform and challenge some of our actual biases, and then shift the ways that we do things.
It's fantastic, but those stereotypes can be quite powerful, can't they? And thinking what younger or older people can or can't do.
Yeah.
So for me, in the work that I do, clearly mindfulness or having some awareness of those attitudes or thoughts, beliefs that we have, and then actively challenging our mindsets around them.
And I think it's
a healthy thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and if you personalise it, we all have got a network of people, and if we have those networks, what's the story that we've got that's in common with that other person that's experiencing something quite different to your experience? And let's talk about it. So creating safer spaces for a conversation versus being so polar in so many conversations, and that's really divisive, and we see that a lot in media and in government, and that's not a great space to be in. We need to have conversations.
Yeah, but you're so right, like it's very hard to understand as a young person what the challenges are for people that are older. And then when you get older, you forget. And of course, the world's changed, so the challenges have changed for young people as well. And I think that's where the reverse mentoring could be incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
To do that. And Peggy, I'm coming to Lucas. I'm going to focus on Lucas specifically on one question I've got in mind for him. But Peggy, your organisation's done a lot with your DEI strategy as well, haven't they?
Yeah, our approach probably with our D&I strategy has very much been with working with our Diversity and Inclusion Council. So we have a group of employees, volunteers within the organisation who are passionate in this space. And they are actually the people who have been informing our strategy and particularly our policies. I think the one thing we've learnt over the last 2 years when it comes to our D&I space is it's great to have a policy. It's great to have those things in place. It's great to have your board approve those, etc. All of that's wonderful. However, without having an action plan that's very, very detailed about where you want to go and how you're going to get there and who's going to drive that, it doesn't go anywhere.
Right.
We thought we had a great D&I strategy in place 2 years ago. And yes, we made progress to it. Did we make significant enough change that we were satisfied with? No.
Yeah.
So our approach certainly over the last 6 months or so now has been about what do we need to do, who is going to lead this, and what's going to be the most important things that are going to focus on that. We have things in there we call inclusion enablers, which is making sure that it's just not about quotas, etc., and those sorts of things. It's about the education, and that's a big part of the enabler, and making sure that it's really coming from within our organisation as well. We also have one of our core principles is care. That's a great enabler for us as well to ensure that that's actually being lived and breathed within our organisation is also sitting underneath that policy and that action plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Those that are interested, what Peggy just spoke to is in the research known as implementation intentions by Professor Peter Goldwitzer and Heidi Halverson, who have shown that when you're really specific about who, when, with who, where, you're more likely to actually put it into action. So Lucas, I'm going to come to you now. So I know you know a bit about the science because we spoke a lot about it many, many moons ago, and of course the research has evolved. And it can be a really tricky topic to cover, meaning and purpose in workplaces. It's quite a sensitive topic. People sometimes don't want to open up to talk about those, deeper topics, if you like. What's been your approach at Xero?
Right. Well, I'll talk about one approach, but just to echo back what has been discussed in terms of this life cycle and your comment about the sandwich generation. Like I am now in the position, I've got 3 young kids, and I'm also looking after my dad who's got dementia. Right. And so my experience and needs now are so different than they were, 10, 15 years ago. And to be able to have those programs that meet people and their needs along the life cycles is so important. The model that I thought I'd speak about today, which is a little bit different, is looking at sort of like a me, we, us model. I think it was discussed a little bit before. Yep. And in terms of an us level, I guess at Xero, so we're a cloud-based accounting platform, but really care about small business. I came from a small business background, and the intention and genuine care and commitment to small businesses is palpable through your organisation. So that connection to purpose, contributing to something larger than yourself, is a sort of binding force within the company, I think. So I think having that at the organisation level, and we've also talked about the principles, like our values at Xero are really heartfelt and lived. One of them's #human, and so you'll see in the culture, people will connect and live these values. And so I think at a team level, how this manifests is, I think there's something incredibly meaningful about creating a community, sort of where you're sort of enacting your values through the way you engage in dialogue, the way you do work together. I think there's something incredibly valuable about actually bringing your values into how work is unfolding at a team level, and then at an individual level. I guess you're sort of going from sort of abstract down to nuts and bolts, and there's a real piece that I get so excited about at the moment, which is that work itself is meaningful. Like, self-efficacy, goal attainment, feeling like you can contribute through relationships, feeling there's so much in the actual act of work itself that if you feel like you can engage and make a difference, your actions meet up with your values, and you can enact these core principles, how you see yourself and how you'd like to make a difference in the world through daily work. I think it can be really impactful. So that's looking at the sort of me, we, and us. And I'd say one other thing as well, it's all well and good to have these kind of like work in a place that's having an impact. But it's almost like there's a second piece, which is actually realising that and actually sort of acknowledging it and making those connections almost like at a daily level.
Like that space for the self-reflection on it. And as you said, making the connection. So just in the last month, I've done a couple of presentations where I've spoken about meaning. Yesterday, I had the privilege of working with 13 of our top astrophysicists in Australia. It's an interesting group, all female. And I asked them about whether they had a job, a career or a calling. And I have to say, not all of them did say it was a calling. I expected a lot of them to say it was very meaningful. But yeah, so it's so easy to connect to it in certain professions. And we were saying in healthcare, Peggy, weren't we, that people can see, and healthcare for you too, people can see the connection. But other professions, whether it's accounting, financial services, can be a bit trickier. But the research actually says that it doesn't necessarily, meaning doesn't rely on the job per se. It's the mindset or the mindset that you have around why you do what you do. So,
if I can just add on
Anthony,
that,
please.
Taking people through that at different stages of their career is really important. Accounting, tax advice, consulting, like I have so much meaning when I come to work and do an audit or a tax return. You don't get a lot of meaning from that. There's a few people that do, when we've had the conversations or the workshops around it, but meaning is actually calling it out for those individuals, creating space for them to reflect, to develop their self-awareness at different life stages in the organisation. So we always hit those topics at every single career level within all the conversations with every learning intervention. We talk about self-awareness. What is it that is your driver? So the goals, it might be different at very different points in time. So if you've got lots of stuff happening for you, work might just be safety. So if I need work to be safe, I need to have that conversation with the people around me, and that's the community of practice that supports and enables it. But it also could be I'm really career ambitious and I want to actually strive for that next level. If that's your meaning for that period of time, that's really critical. But then we can go a bit deeper and go to that higher order kind of meaning, purpose stuff as well. But we anchor to the authentic leadership model, compassionate leadership at the more senior level, and that really helps create language that's common across our different groups. And intact teams, understanding that of one another is the most powerful thing you can create.
Absolutely. And I think we are finding, aren't we, with the younger generations, they don't just want jobs so much anymore. They definitely want a sense of meaning. We could talk about this forever.
We can.
But I think we've got 1 minute to go. So are there any final comments that anyone wants to conclude with?
I think it's just important for us as HR professionals and people in the people space is to recognise that not everybody feels as comfortable having the conversations around this, and that's I find helping those that it's not so natural for them to have it, and giving them some tools to work with through that employee life cycle. Just adding a couple of questions in their check-ins with their employees, putting it in their performance conversations to make sure that their employee groups of any age group background can find meaning and purpose in the work that they do. So I think it's that's the part we can play, and checking in on those employees that they are getting the conversations they need. So, it's a great opportunity, as well as community care work and sustainability pieces that we're putting in place for generations to feel like not just the work they do, but the company they work for is actually thinking about the environment and the people.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Oh yeah, we're right on 9 seconds. So thank you so much, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed today as well, and the conversation. Thank you to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm coming to give you a quick thank you. I'm a little late, sorry.